Mayoral Memo with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.
You're listening to Tony Graham on Binjang 91.5, and we've just had a council meeting on Thursday night. That's the ordinary meeting of Dubbo Regional Council. So to talk about that, I have in studio today and on the line the Mayor of Dubbo Regional Council. Guess who? Matthew Dickerson. G'day, Matthew.
G'day, Tony. And actually just a minor change there, Tony. We didn't have it on Thursday night this week because of Anzac Day. So quite unusual. We had a council meeting on Wednesday night. I don't ever remember having a council meeting on Wednesday night before. Maybe we have, but I can't remember it. So it was Wednesday night, and it was actually a late meeting. I like to make sure we move through our meetings in a timely fashion, but making sure good debate occurs in those meetings. But this is the latest meeting definitely ever that I've seen with Dubbo Regional Council, and I don't remember a meeting with Dubbo City Council going this late, so we didn't get out of that meeting till after 11 o'clock, Tony.
Right. Well, you've tricked me again. No, it's Wednesday instead of Thursday. But anyway, we can move on from that.
That's right. It was a bit unusual.
I like your gags. You know, I always have a laugh. Anyway, let's get serious now. So let's start off with the changes or proposed changes to the bulky waste service to the community. What's the idea of this and how's it going to work?
Well, the idea is twofold. One is, as people know, when we do have our bulky waste collection, that's an annual pickup, a once a year pickup, then what tends to happen is people aren't sure when their zone is, when their date is, so they don't want to miss out on it, so they put their rubbish out early. Make sure it's out there early, make sure it's all there ready to be collected. And so what tends to happen is we end up with a lot of bulky waste put out on footpaths around the entire community. And I mean, some people talk about it being great for people that love their trash and treasure hunts. They go through and they pick through these bits and pieces, but that probably adds to the mess to a certain extent. And people do comment that it does look a bit untidy around the whole area while that bulky waste collection is going on. The second part is it's only used by a small part of the community. A minority of the community uses that, and we pay a lot of money for the vehicles to go around to the whole community and pick up all these areas, even though it's not like rubbish bins. They're not stopping at every particular site. So we've looked at some other places, some other locations that do it slightly differently. So, for example, Tamworth, Central Coast, Camden, Wallandilly, Penrith, Lake Macquarie. All of those places are ones that we've found that do it on a booking service. And the way this would work is that you would still have a time that your waste could be collected, but it would be multiple times throughout the year. So it wouldn't just be a one-off opportunity. There might be 5 or 6 different times that your zone, for example, would be able to be picked up. So if you're in zone 1, you might be, okay, your zone is picked up in week 1 of the year or week 8 or week 15 or week 22. Thered be time frames and exact dates put around those, obviously. And then you could book your bulky waste collection in those timeframes and ring up or go online and book and say, oh, I'm in this time zone, can you come around on the 15th of July and pick it up? And that would be then booked in. So you would know you put out your bulky waste on that day or maybe the day before, so we're not having all this waste around the community for a long period of time. We think from a user perspective, you've got more opportunities throughout the year to use that so that you've got more flexibility rather than, oh, that was last month. I've got some stuff I'd love to put out there now. I've missed my opportunity for a year. You'd have multiple times throughout the year to do it. You'd still only have one chance to do it in terms of once throughout the year, but you'd have multiple times you could book that in, if that makes sense. And then there's also a cost saving to council as well. Not a huge cost saving, but we're always trying to find everywhere we can just make sure we're doing things in the most efficient way. This is a trial for 12 months, Tony. The idea is let's give it a go, see how it works. If it works well, we'd then look to continue that on. The other option, which isn't a part of the trial, but we've looked at is used in other locations, is that you would have the opportunity potentially to have pickups at other times throughout the year, but you might have to pay for those. So you get one for free, and then after that you might pay for those other pickups throughout the year. But at this stage in the trial, it would only be once throughout the year.
Yeah. Well, moving on to our next topic, that's the contentious Cameron Park toilets. As everybody knows, we had a more than adequate toilet block in Cameron Park prior to Dubbo Regional Council coming along, in the last council that is. demolishing them and replacing them with something that was completely inadequate. And it's also very disappointing to hear that we still have a Dubbo councillor who is still trying to defend that particular decision going forward. And really, how out of touch can that person be? Actually, I would challenge that person to give me a call and we'll have a discussion about that. But in the meantime, there are plans afoot, which is great for this current council to actually rectify the mistake of the previous one, and that is to look at the process of upgrading these toilets to a suitable configuration that works for everybody, which it doesn't do now, and that's very clear. So where are we at now? Because I know that was discussed on Wednesday night.
Exactly right, and it has been progressing, and that's fantastic to see. It has been progressing. Councillors in the main and the majority, which obviously is what counts, Tony, the majority council vote, realise that the replacement toilets there at Cameron Park are not adequate, and the community in Wellington is definitely missing out just by the fact that you will not get buses or potentially even tourists stopping there now because there aren't enough toilet facilities. That's an impact on the economy of Wellington. So councillors realise that. What we have resolved to do is to look at some of the options. There were various options put forward in the business papers on Wednesday night. Put those options forward as part of the view of the draft budget and operational plan consultation process. So this is all part of our budgetary process. And also look at what other options there are and the costings for looking at different toilet facilities around the area. So, for example, you've got toilets at the library, but they're only open when the library's open. Is there some way we could have those toilets available outside of the time the library's open? There's also the cafe that's just sitting there, and again, it's up to the cafe operator to be open for those toilets to be used. But is that something we could have where those toilets would be available as well? So not just looking at replacing the existing toilets, not just looking at building another set of toilets to give you more options there with toilets, but looking at other options around the area. So the bottom line from all that, Tony, is councillors realise there is an issue there. Councillors realise there needs to be a solution. What that solution looks like, we haven't determined what that looks like at this stage. And that'll be an important part of the consultation process with our draft budget out on display now.
Okay. I should mention there a higgledy-piggledy approach to the toilet situation is not going to do it. I mean, we can't have a bus dropping people off in 3 different spots along Cameron Park to go to the toilet, for example. That's quite ridiculous. And it needs to be central, particularly when we have crowds there. And we do have events happening usually about once a month in Cameron Park, if not more. So we do need to have it not just for the tourists, not having to line up, which they do now, and busloads bypassing the town and tourists with it, but also we needed to have it adequate for just doing public things for the park. I mean, the public parks are for people, and if you don't have any adequate facilities in the park to cater for them, obviously there's a problem there that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Tony, and all of that will be taken into account. Of course, it's always with everything we do, Tony, it's a balancing act, balancing our budget versus the needs of the community versus the needs of all different parts of the community. So again, it'll be a good opportunity for Wellington residents to have a bit of a say on this during our display process for our budget and give more feedback around that. So at this stage, the good news is councillors identify there's a problem there, but we haven't quite worked out what the solution will be. The solution would be easy if we had unlimited funds, but we don't have unlimited funds.
Yeah, sure. Now, Burrendong Way, the Safer Roads program has finally caught up with Burrendong Way. So they're going to be doing some bitumen spraying along there. So whereabouts do you know?
I can't tell you the exact location. This was really the decision at council was a tender, the awarding of a tender, and so that was dealt with in the confidential section of the council meeting. And essentially, it was basically a tender for that. That tender for Burrendong Way, that bitumen safe sealing, was awarded to Countrywide Asphalt and Civil, and the amount of that was $366,590.85. And again, I could find out exactly where that is for you. Off the top of my head, I don't have that information in front of me at the moment to tell you the exact location of that spraying. People would probably identify some of those areas along there that aren't in great condition and will probably be covered by that. But I haven't got that information for you at the moment. I'm sorry, Tony.
Okay. And council's looking at spending nearly $1.8 million on tender for a design and construction of Burrendong 1 and Molong Street bridges. So I'm sure some of our listeners would like to know where those bridges are exactly.
Yeah, so again, this was another awarding of a tender. So you've got Saunders Civil Build Proprietary Limited. Now, just to make sure people are okay with this is no relation to Dougal Saunders, our local member. That was a question that I was asked about that particular one. So no relation there. So that was a tender, as you correctly pointed out, $1.794 million. Now, it'd probably be fair to say that this should have been done sooner. And this was part of a grant. This was part of the 2023-2024 budget for Safer Roads program grant. So that's where we're getting that money from. That wasn't out of council funds as such. But again, making sure when we get these grants, we use the money in a timely fashion is obviously very important. Now, in terms of your question there, the exact location of these, so the Molong Street Bridge, it's the existing wooden Molong Street Bridge, which is in the village of Stewart Town, and replacing that with a new concrete structure. We're pretty good at the moment, Tony, in terms of timber bridges in our LGA. We've got very few timber bridges left. I know some other mayors I've spoken to in years gone by, some of them had a lot of timber bridges, and getting them all replaced with concrete bridges was a really big project, and there was government money available for that, but it's still a big project. So this particular project will basically be the demolition and reconstruction of the Molong Street Bridge, and essentially it'll be on the same alignment. And so it'll be a detour in place because it's a kind of an urbanised nature of that area, so there'll be a detour around that bridge while that's in place. And then the Burrendong number 1 bridge, so this is the existing Burrendong 1 bridge. It's approach at Fashions Mount Road in Mumble. So again, this is a current timbered bridge that is over the Long Creek. That'll be demolished and replaced with a new concrete structure. During this construction, there'll be a side track constructed, and that'll be to the north of the bridge works. So hopefully people that live around those areas are familiar with those two spots, and that gives them enough information to know where those two are. But good news is, Tony, getting on with it, making sure these works happen, making sure things are completed. When we get these grants, we want to make sure they get knocked over and done so that we can go back for more grants and show to the government, whichever level of government it is, to show the government that we're able to effectively deliver on these projects and move on to the next one.
Okay. Well, of course, there's another tender to talk about too, and that's the shared pathway at Pioneer Park here in Wellington. Now, I'm not sure who you're sharing it with. I hope it's with me, actually. Tell us about that.
So you'll remember the damage that was done to that Pioneer Park area from the last flooding. And I remember going and looking at some of that area there, the flooding that occurred, or that very fast flow down the Bell River when the Bell River was very wide for a short period of time. And I remember looking at even just some of the trees that were along that area there. You could look down maybe a metre underneath those tree roots there, and there was bitumen along the far side of Pioneer Park, and that bitumen was all washed away there. So the replacement, if you remember the discussion at the time, the replacement was to put in a roadway down one side where the water wouldn't flow as fast, but rather than rebuild the other side where we believed that it would just keep being washed away, then we thought building a shared pathway around there so people could park on one side and walk around the other side. So this shared pathway effectively goes around, I would describe it as the northern side of Pioneer Park, and loops around there for people to walk around there. So hopefully that gives you enough information to understand where that area is around Pioneer Park.
I think so, Matthew.
Yeah.
Now, the last topic is there's news about the so-called REACT Centre, which is all about, I guess, capitalising on renewable energy in our area. So tell us a bit more about where you're at with that.
So this has been ticking away and building momentum, I'm pleased to say, Tony, for a little while now. It started off with a discussion. I actually had a discussion with Energy Co board members and representatives associated with Energy Co about this vision I had. And it started off as a REAC, R-E-A-C, which was a Renewable Energy Awareness Centre. And the idea has grown from there. And I came up with the idea based on things like the Parkes Radio Telescope, 100,000 visitors a year, the Snowy Hydro Scheme, 150,000 visitors a year. And if we could have something like that as a tourism attraction, I thought that would be fantastic for Wellington. Maybe 100,000 people a year coming to Wellington. That would just be fantastic for the economy of Wellington. as we kept going along and talking to various proponents in this, it became obvious that training would be an important part of it. And then Councillor Richard Ivey brought a resolution to Council, which was approved, or brought a notice of motion to Council, which was resolved by Council to go ahead with that. And in terms of that feedback, we renamed it to a REACT Centre, and that stood for Renewable Energy Awareness and Career Training Centre. And we thought that career training would be an important part of that. After we've gone down that path, the momentum is built even quicker. So it's a very sensible motion that Councillor Ivey brought forward. The momentum is built even quicker now. And what we're finding is we've got proponents who are keen to see training done locally, because some of the training they do for staff that are going to work on a wind turbine, for example, they need to send their staff down to Victoria, which obviously gets expensive, and they'd rather have the training out here. We've now got, Tony, go back one step. The resolution from Council was to do a basic business case using internal resources, not at a lot of expense, to be able to show people something. So we did that. We had a basic business case. I had the opportunity to present that to Twiggy Forrest when he was in Wellington. I've presented that to Chris Bowen. I've presented that to Penny Sharp, the federal member and the state member for the area that we're talking about with our res. And on the back of that, and on that presentation to a number of proponents as well, we're now at the point, Tony, where we've got 3 separate proponents that have all submitted $50,000 or will submit $50,000 to Council for us to build a detailed feasibility study. So there's $150,000, not from us, not from Council, not from the community, but from those 3 proponents to build that feasibility study. And we're having further discussions. In fact, today I'm having a video conference with Energy Co to see how we can keep progressing this, because at some stage we'll need someone to fund the building of this. Now, the feasibility study will tell us exactly how much we'll need and what sort of usage we'll have. But again, I'm pretty excited by this because you add the training in to the visitor experience, and I think a minimum of 100,000 people we could see coming through Wellington, and that would be forever. That would be something that would add to Wellington's tourism offering with a huge injection into the economy on an ongoing basis. The land we're looking at is One Tree Hill, and again, we've got a bit of negotiation before we can actually secure that land. It doesn't have to be there, but we want it close enough to Wellington that Wellington community would see advantages of that, but also close enough to these renewable energy projects that people could see these projects. So very exciting progress so far, Tony. And I must admit, quicker progress than even I expected, because sometimes with these things, you have to start building the momentum, building the logic for it, building the cases for it, and years later, you get to the stage where it becomes a real thing. So I think of, say, Macquarie Homestay in Dubbo, 2009, Dawn Fardell and Lillian Brady first started talking about the concept. I started the fundraising for it in 2013. 2019, it finally got built. And I think that's almost a normal sort of time frame. 10 years from concept to actually having it is pretty quick. With the momentum with the REACT Centre, Tony, I think it'll be much quicker than that.
Yeah, it'd be great, because when you think about it, Matthew, we actually don't have any man-made attractions in Wellington following the slow and painful demise of what was considered to be a very good one in Cameron Park. So I'm sure the residents would really welcome this.
I think the residents will welcome this. I think the businesses will welcome this. But more importantly, because this is probably where the money's going to come from, Tony, the proponents around the area and the state government are both welcoming this as well. And so we're going to need some money out of those to actually make this happen. So I think it's a good news story all round. We've just got to make it happen, Tony.
Yeah, fantastic. And we've been speaking to Matthew Dickinson, the Mayor of Dubbo Regional Council, about last Wednesday night's Ordinary Council meeting. Thanks, Matthew.
Thank you very much, Tony.
Mayoral Memo with Matthew Dickinson from Dubbo Regional Council.